events, and we also have public lectures like this one. March and April have been a period which we catered to women and the histories of women in all forms and incarnations. We had music by female composers and literature by Maria Maddalena de Pazzi, who was a mystic Carmelite nun from the 6th century. And today we are closer to home, and we are going to look at the stories of women in early modern Malta and affected by the Inquisition. It's a great pleasure to welcome an authority on the subject, Professor Carmel Cassar. Please give him a warm welcome.
To Alex, and thank you very much for all of you to be here today and to this evening. The very happy ideas with you about witchcraft and women. Actually, this is a subject which has struck me particularly a long time ago. In fact, when I was doing my Master of Philosophy in Anthropology, this was in 1988. It's a long time ago. I was so fascinated by this subject, and I was already very much into my work at the Inquisition records in Malta, that I decided to write my dissertation on witchcraft and sorcery. It was a very interesting study, actually. It was just a small thesis, but it was published. It was published on Mediterranean Studies way back in 1993. Then eventually it was even reprinted without my knowledge, I must say, in a series of volumes which were published in the United States, which were entitled New Perspectives in Historical Studies. And for example, volume 1 was about classical times and so on. Volume 5 it was about 4 and 5 were about the early modern period, that is the period which were about 16th, 17th centuries mainly, and then eventually there was even the last volume which was about modern witchcraft. Now, I'd like to say that witchcraft has changed a lot over it, so when someone comes along and he asks, or she asks me, witchcraft today, well, it's very different from the way it was done in the past. And in fact, if we look at the Inquisition records, incidentally, very interestingly, approximately 1/3 of the records, starting from approximately 1600 to nearly the very end, until that is the Inquisition left the island of Malta and Gozo, I'm talking of up to 1798, only a few months before Napoleon Bonaparte, General Bonaparte, took over the islands, and the knights had to leave as well. The Inquisition left a month before the knights, but that was in May. The last Inquisition, Carpenia, in fact, if you go to the Inquisition Visitors Palace, there is written 1793, Carpenia, is still around, because they never really bothered to put 1798, which is his last date. So we have 1793, just below us, and it continues. He's still around. But we know that he left before the French came. Now, the interesting about that period is that approximately, and I can say this because we had quite a few students who way back in the 90s, I had encouraged them to do their little BA dissertations on the subject. And there were quite a few people who were interested in this period. So some did, for example, the mid-17th century, others did the late 17th century, others did the 18th century, and so on. And they would take a particular inquisitor. The interesting thing is that approximately 1/3 of these accusations are about witchcraft. However, the most colorful witchcraft cases that we have date back to approximately between 1595 to around 1630. In 1630, we start having these inquisitors who take witchcraft with a very strong pinch of salt. They still have proceedings going on about witchcraft. However, where they don't take them really seriously, that much seriously. So, you know, sometimes they give light punishments. Most times they don't even bother. You know, they hear the witnesses and it's over. And the period that I'm particularly interested in is the period approximately between the 1590s to the 1620s. That is the most colorful one. It's also very colorful elsewhere. I'd like to remind you that there are no cases of people being burnt at the stake for witchcraft. There's no such thing here in Malta. And we do have, however, a lot of penitential, or rather, sentences. That is, they are given a penitential sentence, meaning that if they want to humiliate them, the worst thing of all, especially if it is a recurring, which in other words she's being accused, goes 3, 4, 5 times, then in that case they would be taken on, you know, they would have to ride a donkey the other way around with a placard hanging on their neck and so on, and then they will have to, they will be whipped in the main squares, especially of Virgo, as one de tromba. In other words, there would be someone who would be, you know, blowing the horn or I don't know, something. And obviously everyone is watching this. As far as the sentence is concerned, a humiliating way of you know, it's a great dishonor, it's a great shame actually. And what they would do would be to make them wear the abitello, as it was known, which was a yellow garb, which passed through the neck with a red cross in front and another red cross on the back. They would be made to kneel in front of the main altar during High Mass on a Sunday with a candle in hand, and everyone is looking at you. That is not very exciting, it's extremely humiliating. And as a result of that, obviously, that particular person would be shamed for life. And if you want to ruin, someone's reputation, that was the best way how to go about it. And it was sometimes it took place as well. However, most times they did not arrive to that level. There were also occasions when people were accused of witchcraft, especially if they were cortigiane, in other words, courtesans, to use the nicer word. Then, in other words, these people might end up being exiled. For example, we have the case I'll be mentioning it of Serafina Daniel, who was actually exiled here, but she had been recurring inherent activities of witchcraft activities. So many hours. And that was in 1625. 1625 there was a fantastic case study, actually with proceedings against 40 women. And that makes it extremely simple. What I'm going to do here is to say a few things about why women maybe. And I'm going to start here by giving an example of one particular case. This is a case which is quite rare. The case, it's the Gozo Castle, which is the citadel. This is something which is one of the documents which I discovered myself many years ago while I was actually reorganizing the archives. There were piles of documents. We didn't know what they were like. We didn't know what there was. This is at the Cathedral Archive. It has been taken up to Udina from the stables of the then Bishop's Palace. Nowadays it's the Ecclesiastical Tribunal here in Valletta. And we didn't know exactly what there was. And out of this mass of documents, we managed to single out 30 volumes. I was responsible of this. So there was also this case of this particular woman, which in my view is extremely interesting. It's about a midwife who I'm going to start with that case study. One final thing which I would like to say is that originally the Inquisition that we are dealing with, and it's important to say this because many people mix Inquisitions. Actually, there were three types of Inquisition. There is the medieval Inquisition, which was established in the early 13th century mainly against the Cathars, who were mainly based in the Pyrenees. There's a fantastic book by one of the greatest French historians. I've just learned that he passed away a couple of years ago. I'm referring to Emmanuel Herval-Ladurie. The book in question is Montaillou, and it is based on these proceedings against the Cathars of this French village of the Pyrenees. And there is a lot of connection between Catalonia and Languedoc, basically, those two areas. There's a lot of movement going on. And that is the medieval Inquisition. It started with that, but eventually it also tackled other areas, including Jeanne d'Arc, for example, eventually. That is the medieval Inquisition. We also had it here in Malta. That was mainly run by the Dominicans. And their patron saint is Saint Peter the Hermit, who was eventually martyred in the Alps. And usually when they show him assassinated, he's got what do you call it, a sword in his hand, like that. It's a bit macabre, but that's how they killed him apparently. The second one, the second Inquisition, is the Spanish Inquisition, which was essentially an enormous reorganization of the Inquisition in Spain. It was eventually followed even in Portugal, and the idea was to control the conversos. In other words, those people who had converted from Judaism or Islam in the Iberian Peninsula, in Spain and eventually Portugal. And that is how it starts off. Eventually, it starts getting involved in other aspects as well, including witchcraft and even heresy, that is the control of the spread of Protestant practices. And finally, we have the Roman Inquisition. The Roman Inquisition, you find it mainly on mainland Italy, as well as in territories where the Holy See has some hold. And here we're referring to Cologne in Germany, as well as in Carcassonne and Avignon in France. Plus the Maltese Islands for a very, very particular reason, because the Maltese Islands were run by a religious order, the Order of St. John. As a result, unlike Sicily, we were technically part of the Kingdom of Sicily at the time. But unlike Sicily, which was under the Spanish Inquisition, Malta was, like the rest of the Italian peninsula, it had the Roman Inquisition. The Roman Inquisition was originally meant to stop the spread of Lutheran or Protestant practices in the Italian peninsula. In Malta, for example, we know we had Tosina who came here, and eventually, we learned, just gave a lecture organized by the French embassy a month ago, I think, or a bit less actually, a few weeks ago, where we actually discussed the fact that these people were not Lutherans, as many people think, but they were essentially Huguenots. How come we are saying that? Because in the letters, Dosina, his letters, he specifies that these people mostly ended up in Geneva. Now, Geneva is the place of John Calvin, and obviously John Calvin, the Calvinist, Huguenots in France are Calvinists too. So this is the idea. Here, on the other hand, in the Roman Inquisition, from the 1590s, practically there was control over the spread of Protestantism, so they started to look at heretical practices, the issue of fasting, in Catholic, especially after the Council of Trent, in this period in question, you have, for example, the 40 days of Lent. Those those are fasting days. Then you have a Wednesday, a Friday, and a Saturday. Then you also had the vigil, that is the day before the celebration of a particular feast. So that was also a day when you were expected to fast. And fasting was very strict. So if you did not fast, or if you were eating meat, or cheese, or eggs, and so on, you were obviously controlled by the Inquisition. I'm saying all this as a background because it is necessary to understand the basics of the way things function. And so now I can have a look at this fantastic case study. And I will tell you why I am interested. I found it fascinating. And I am referring to June of 1599. In fact, on the 14th of June of 1599, a godson by the name of Valerio Cauchi appeared before Inquisitor Antonio Hortensio and made a remarkable, I would call it a fantastic denunciation. In fact, Cauchi claimed that he had been living at the Gozo Castello, they used to call it the Castello del Gozo, for about 20 years, he said. And he recounted how 3 or 4 years before, he was on the terrace of his house, and he had seen, this is fantastic, 2 women, naked women, riding wildly on broomsticks. That's why I showed you the broomsticks there. Through the air, at night. Fantastic. It's the only case study that we have with these women on broomsticks. This is not an event, or something. Now, who were the women in question? The women in question, now I will tell you how he came up with this fantastic denunciation. The women in question were Elisabetta Caruana and her daughter Romana, who was, we learn, a prostitute. In fact, Cauchi stated that Elisabetta Caruana, he calls her a well-known, sorrowful woman and witch, who could fly. She could fly. Fantastic. And to support his claim, he asserted that several others have seen the 2 women on their broomstick, flying on the broomstick. Fantastic, no? I wish I could fly on a broomstick sometimes. It would make life easier. Can you imagine going to university on the broomstick? You avoid a lot of traffic jams. Parking problems, and so many things. Fantastic. Anyway, Cauchi's deposition must have generated some commotion at the Inquisition tribunal because no one ever made such a statement in front of the Inquisitor. So, in fact, they brought several gossips to give their, to give their evidence. And these included quite a few people who were living in this little Gozo castle, the citadel nowadays we call it. It included one called Adriana, the wife of Ambrosio Muscat, from Rabat Gozo. It included others, like, for example, Vincenzo Scerri. Now, Vincenzo Scerri is a credible person because he was an official of the Bishop's Curia, who also stayed in Gozo. In other words, it's important to remind you that at the time in Gozo there was no bishop, so you had this individual who was actually taking care of the interests of the bishop in Gozo. Then there were 2 others. One was Pedro Ketkuti and the other one was Joseph Borgi. Not Joseph, Joseph, but they used to write it sometimes like that. They stated that Elisabetta was considered, in fact, a witch. They agreed on that. She's a witch. And they could, however, not specify the type of witchcraft she practiced. What type of witchcraft did she practice? Did she practice love magic? Did she practice healing? Did she practice maleficio, sorcery? They couldn't say. Then there was one Domenico Carceppo who testified, who said that in addition to her reputation as a witch, Elisabetta had served as a procuress for over 15 years. Now that is interesting. she was a procuress for whom? Usually for the knights who were based in Gozo, including the governor of Gozo, who was a knight. Obviously, these guys were supposed to have these famous vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Let's face it, they broke them all, without distinction. They loved to break these, especially the one of chastity was a big problem. And he first elaborated, in fact, this chapter, that she would approach men offering her services as a go-between if they wish to pursue a particular woman. So this is the main problem here with Isabella. However, the interesting thing is that no one claimed to have seen Isabella on the broomstick. It is only Valerio Cauchi who said so, despite the fact that Valerio Cauchi had insisted that other people could vouch for him, that she actually had been on the broomstick. Now, that is an image of how people used to imagine. I mean, it's a kind of a vision of how many people think it is. It used to be, it looked like actually this Gozo Cassar. So it's very interesting. First of all, it was all built up almost. I mean, people lived there. Nowadays, practically no one lives there. It's important to remember that the Gozo Castle until 1637, all the people of Gozo had to go and sleep there. So practically until 1637, the people of Gozo were expected, they used to ring a bell and people had to go for safety. So they had to go and live and sleep inside the castle. Now, the issue, going back to Isabella, the issue of Isabella is that the fact that she has this role as a go-between, which appears to have been the basis for this accusation. And the deep enmity as well, let's face it, of this Valerio Cauchi. In fact, during his deposition of 15 June, that is the following day, Cauchi revealed the reason for his intense hatred towards Isabella. And here comes another aspect of a family's preoccupation with girls. They had a preoccupation with girls. In fact, he explained that 3 years earlier, Isabella had attempted to procure the services of his 13-year-old stepdaughter. Nowadays, we would call her a pedophiliac, I would say. But in those times, for who? For the lieutenant governor of Gozo, an Italian knight, Fra Sansone, his name was. So she tried to entice her to have a relationship with him. Now, this is interesting too, how he had managed to save the girl. So he managed to save the girl. However, she was left partly dishonored. What is the result of this? The result of this is that it has made it extremely difficult for him to marry her, to find her a suitable husband. You know, you tell me, you find her a suitable husband at the age of 13. At the time, it was quite common. Girls used to be married. I have evidence from also these documents of the Inquisition, where even girls of 11 were married. It's rare, but they were also married. At 11, 12, usually by the age of 16, a girl was married. So there is a very big distinction between the husband would be, for example, I don't know, 26, 28, and the girl is 16. It's quite common. So that explains why this guy, Valerio Cauchi, had this problem with Isabella. In fact, we have the same day, we have Magnifica Vittoria Formosa, who had first denounced Isabella to the Holy Office. And here I have a quotation. The quotation obviously has been translated into English for practicality. And she says, I'm not close to her, to Isabella, but from hearsay, and hearsay played an enormous part in the communal relations I can say that some people considered her a sorrowful procuress, and while others claim, and this is very interesting, that she has visions of saints and converses with St. Paul. So she has even chats with St. Paul himself. I have heard from several people at the Gozo Castle that she had been accused of practicing magic by the Holy Office as well. So, strictly speaking, Elisabetta had quite a bit of, a double, what do you call it?
Personality.
Double personality in a way. She's a witch, she's a procuress, but at the same time, she is also speaking to saints. She's a holy woman. So, and there is a reason why she is associated with holiness, and I explained who was it, in fact, Elisabetta in reality, and this is very important. She appeared before the Holy Office Tribunal in Malta, that is at Virgo, on May 23rd. And she claimed to be from Rabat Gozo, where she was born and still resided in 1599. In other words, she has always resided at Rabat Gozo, except for a period of time. She claimed to have reached the age of 50 or thereabouts. In other words, in 1599, to be 50, she is well advanced in age. Nowadays, when you are 50, we say you're younger. But in 1599, you were well advanced in age. Definitely, if you are a widow and you are 50, you're going to remarry again. It's very difficult. It's practically impossible. So you end up as a single woman, basically. And this is also very interesting. We're dealing with a woman who is single. It's important to keep in mind. In a society where women must be protected, single women are prone to this and that and the other. Elisabetta could not figure out why she was summoned, and this is something of the Inquisition, typical. So you are summoned to the Inquisition, and then they ask you, why do you think you are here? Who knows why I'm here? You have to tell me. No, you have to tell us why you think you are here. And you start telling things about yourself, which they do not know. So they learn more about you and your doings. So you say, well, maybe because it was on a Friday during Lent, I had a piece of meat. Maybe I should tell them. So you also were eating to be on a Friday. Or maybe, I did this and that, and then keep on adding to your sins. That is how it worked. It's important to specify that the Inquisition worked on the lines of Roman law. And in Roman law, I'm not a lawyer, but I had to look into this, obviously to be able to study these kind of topics. In Roman law, you are guilty unless proved otherwise. And that is very important. So you are guilty unless you prove them otherwise. And to prove them otherwise, sometimes you are given the corda as well. You are stretched a little bit. Anyway, now Elisabetta eventually expressed her wish to join the Dominican Terdore. In fact, she said, it says, the Terdore, she says it in Italy, io voglio tornare a monaca dell'Annunciata. Nunciata, it means the Annunciation. The Annunciation here, they are specifying the Dominican Church in Bilbao. We have to remember that this is in front of the Holy Office, in front of the Visitor's Palace, basically. Even though it was destroyed in the Second World War, but it's still there, technically. And she explained that she had made a vow to wear the habit 7 years before. However, she was unable to do so because she could not. She did not have the money to buy the cloth in order to make the habit. Can you imagine the poverty of these people? She could not afford to buy the cloth. Now, Elisabetta considered herself, and this is very, very interesting, a devout Catholic woman. She was a very good woman for herself. And as a resident of Rabat Gozo, she attended church regularly. she confessed monthly, and she actively participated in religious processions at which she often led groups of young girls. In other words, she considered herself to be a very good Catholic woman. Not a witch, definitely, even though she procured as well, but that was okay. So, she also did arms to provide for these girls, and this is very interesting because she also taught prayers to these girls, and also, good Christian virtues, so to speak. She led her efforts after the Ottoman siege of 1565. Now, this is important. The Ottoman siege of 1565 is a focal point. Everyone is referring to it. They don't refer to anything else. But those people who could remember the siege, this is 1599, quite a long time after, over 30, and they can still say, yes, have been doing this since the time of the Ottoman siege. After the Ottoman siege. The Ottoman siege is a focal point. She claimed that her efforts after the Ottoman siege of 1565, she managed to influence the Grand Master to introduce almsgiving for 7 manageable girls in one go. And we know that she is referring here, without saying it, to the so-called Cumul di Carità. It was established, obviously her name never features anywhere, but it was run one of the notables of Medina by the name of Gregory. Obviously he's a Magnifico, not this man here, he was an important personality. But the fact remains that she was very much involved in this establishment of, they used to give basically to 7 poor girls of manageable age. And I said manageable age would be 13, 14, 15. Now, Isabella also shared insights into her youth, and this is very interesting. For example, she said that when she was 10, she was said to live at the so-called Monasterio dei Vergini at Medina in Malta, in Medina. And at the time she went to Santa Scola, which was the Benedictine monastery or nunnery, which after the siege was moved to Birgu. Now, in fact, the St. Scholastic nuns are at Birgu, but at that time it was next to St. Peter's at Medina. And that is where she went. She spent 4 years with the nuns. And there she attended sermons, engaged in theological discussions, and she could even understand, for example, Italian, and it's very particular, very interesting. During these discussions, her peers, that is other girls who were at the convent, formed the belief that, now this is very interesting, that the Virgin Mary remained a virgin after the birth of Jesus. She bore Jesus from side or breast. In fact, it is written in Maltese of the time, and she says, the clerk wrote it in Maltese of 1599, it says, Men hobbia wendidu. It's very interesting. He writes it in Maltese too. And a belief that she had throughout her life. And she never questioned its validity, nor even confessed. It was sacred truth for her. And there is also another issue which she mentions, which is that Christ was crucified, was 4 months old, but I'll come to that later. This is just to give you an idea of at the time. They used to sit on a chair, a special chair, childbed chair, which was low, and there were women, of course, hardly ever any kind of stand. Okay, so when asked whether she was in the habit of walking after sunset, now this is very interesting. The way the Inquisitor, asks the question is fantastic. He's telling her, are you in the habit of going out after sunset? It's not right for respectable people to go out after sunset. So you shouldn't go out after sunset. But are you in the habit of going? And Isabella explained, yes, occasionally I have. Why? Because I'm a midwife and I assist women at childbirth. And sometimes women have meant to have children in the middle of the night. I don't tell the woman, listen, wait until tomorrow morning, until sunrise, and then I come. You cannot do that. So if a woman is at childbirth, you have to go and help her there. If it's 1 o'clock in the morning, you go. It's 3 in the morning, you go. And if it's 8 o'clock in the morning, you go as well. So on these occasions, she was always accompanied by those who summoned her and would return immediately after assisting the mother. In other words, they assist the woman in childbirth. But she firmly denied ever riding a broomstick at night. I never went on a broomstick at night. And this is particular. I mean, it was crazy. You make such an assertion, my goodness. But anyway. Now they also brought to witness her daughter, Romana. Romana was a woman of a certain age. She's not young anymore. She's 30. She's Isabetta's daughter, and she's a widow from Gozo. Obviously, the problem with these girls, what would happen is, let's say this Romana was married at 14 or 15, and her husband is a sailor, or a soldier. The probability of this man being captured into slavery, or losing his life at sea, or at war, or during, at war, or wherever, was extremely common at the time. So many a time, these women ended up as widows. They had to live, they had to survive. As a result, in order to be able to survive, they would do something on the side. And many a time, this something on the side ended up prostituting themselves. Yesterday, in fact, I was mentioning the issue of, maybe you have heard of, a very important revolution in Naples, the revolt of Masaniello in 1647. What happened? Masaniello was a fisherman who actually died during this rebellion, which he led. What happened to his wife? His wife moved to lower quarter, which is Quartiere Sanità, and she became a prostitute. She had to survive. So this was quite common at the time. So the interesting thing is, that is one thing, to go to a prostitution, and as well also practicing witchcraft sometimes, especially healing and things like that. And in fact, Isabetta's daughter, Romana, sometimes also was accused rather of witchcraft. In fact, she testified that after her husband's death, she practiced prostitution, but had given it up a year since her deposition. In other words, she found another way how to support herself. That is what it means, basically. As a result, in fact, she was at the time confessing and receiving communion. What does this mean? Confessing and receiving communion, because if you are a prostitute, you cannot confess and receive communion, because you are a sinful person. So, you're falling into sin all the time. You cannot confess and receive communion. But now, she has started, once again, confessing and receiving communion. It's very interesting. Another interesting thing, when asked about her walking about after sunset, she said that she did not stay at night roaming about the streets to avoid, this is very interesting, tarnishing the reputation of her mother and that of her sister-in-law. And here we learn that Isabella, besides Romana, she also had a son who had been married, and practically they seem to have been living together in the same area, the same house, the same building. As a result, in order not to tarnish the reputation of her mother and that of her sister-in-law, she even stayed away from prostitution because of that. So since Romana had practiced prostitution, she did not perceive herself as a woman of virtue. But she perceived her mother, Isabella, as well as her sister-in-law, as women of virtue. Now this is very, very interesting. And when asked about rumors of riding a broomstick at night. Romana denied this accusation. In fact, labeling such actions as acts of madness or possession, devil possession in other words. This is also very interesting because they are associating riding a broomstick with the devil or madness. Now, the two women did extremely well in defending themselves against the gossip. However, accusations against the two of them persisted, both mother and daughter. And the proceedings, they had started in April, on August 31st. Both women, several months later, were subjected to the torture of the so-called corda, the strappado, or also known sometimes as the tocca non tocca. This meant that they were suspended by their tied hands and pulled up, as in the speak show in the end. It was a terrible torture because it would dislocate your arms. However, despite the brutal method, neither Romana nor her mother confessed to witchcraft or to anything, or to having ridden on the broom or whatever it is. Now, the morning after her interrogation, in fact, Romana received a sentence. Now, the sentence is a pecuniary sentence. She was made to pay 20 once. 20 once is the equivalent of 50 scudi, which is a very hefty sum. I know why these visitors used to do this. Eventually it was stopped. The reason is that they wanted to upgrade the Inquisitor's premises. So, in fact, Rome sent letters specifically to stop this bad habit of making requisitions of money from people, from those accused. Was that? But that is the reason why, because they wanted to upgrade, and they upgraded a lot of things. When they left, for example, an excellent kitchen. You can actually have even ice cream and coffee and chocolate and everything. They left everything behind, so quite a lot of luxury. So they had a fantastic library, and they did quite well. So she was made to pay these 20 once. 20 once, 1 once is 1 ounce. Practically it is 2.5 scudi. So you have 20 once, that would come to about 50 scudi, which is a lot of money. And when you consider that 50 scudi, you don't get it as a salary for a year. Just to put you in the picture, what we're talking about here. You won't get 50 scudi for a year of work. A man who is working, he doesn't usually get, to get 50 scudi, you need to have a respectable job. Her mother, Isabella, actually faced a harsher fate. First of all, she spent over 2 weeks in prison at Inquisitor's Palace. And the sentence was issued on September 18th, quite a bit longer. And then the formal reading of the sentence took place on 21st September. Nowadays we would say Independence Day. Isabella was accused of witchcraft, most seriously for allegedly riding a broomstick. It is specified in the sentence that she rode a broomstick naked in the middle of the night, which is an accusation that implied a pact with Satan, with the devil. She was further accused of heresy for professing to ride specifically with Diana and or Herodias, that's how it is written, and worshipping the devil. In other words, she is accused of worshipping the devil. This hardly ever comes up in the Inquisition records, this worship of devils and so on. It's very, very unique. Now, Isabella also faced charges for dressing as a male. This is also very interesting. the modern world, dressing up as a male. And I'm showing you a picture of the 17th century. This is not Malta, this is English, but it gives you an idea. The man with the stuff here, weaving or whatever with the baby, while the woman is wearing the sword with the basket and wearing a helmet. That is the world turned upside down. That was something which was not acceptable at all in early modern society. So, it's practically what we're doing is reversal of social and what is known as gender norms. Obviously, this is a society which is very different from the way we do things today, and completely different. While she claimed that her accusers, primarily envious neighbors, undoubtedly misunderstood her actions, she admitted to attending to women at night as a midwife, though, not to go around on a broomstick. Furthermore, however, Isabella was condemned for teaching false doctrines, and this is also very important. For example, like said that the Virgin Mary bore Christ from her breast, and also that Christ underwent this passion at 4 months old. 4 months old, how did she come up with that? Well, very simple. From Christmas to Easter. That's 4 months. That is how these people were very simple. Very simple. So, despite being warned, it was claimed she persisted in her teachings, which further fueled accusations of heresy. This business of accusations of heresy, always people didn't perceive heresy. I mean, the way, the theologian would perceive heresy, they didn't even think about it. But they were accused of it. So, what can we, as a summary of this case, what can we say about the trial of Isabella? First of all, the trial of Isabella Caruana reveals the vulnerabilities of unmarried women in the 16th century, undoubtedly. Vulnerabilities of the 16th century. Now you say, but she was, yes, once she was married, but now she's a widow. So she's a single woman, she's not married anymore. So they were often seen as more susceptible to sin and witchcraft accusations. They were susceptible because they are women, therefore they are weak. Why? Because they lack male protection. They lack male protection is considered to be a big for this particular society. Now the Inquisition was driven by a belief in the reality of witchcraft as ethical and diabolical as well. And obviously targeted women who defied conventional roles of care and submission. What is the job of a woman? The job of a woman is to be caring, care of her husband, of her children, of her old age relatives and so on. And also submissive to the husband, or to the father, or whoever it is, as a man. This was quite standard until relatively recently. Now, the problem with Isabella is her independent lifestyle. She was independent, she was free. And this made her a prime target. And there was much of the hostility directed at her, which came also from other women. And the problem with women is that sometimes women can be very difficult with other women. And this is very, very, very particular, even it emerges from the accusations. You have a lot of women who are insecure. So they can be very difficult too. Now, the trial also highlights social tensions and fears of the time. It shows how accusations of witchcraft were often rooted in envy as well as competition among women. Competition among women is very strong. It's important to say that while she was doing her witchcraft activities, obviously she was making some money. So she's making money out of midwifery. And in fact, it reflects also broader anxieties about women's autonomy and as well as the supernatural. Now, I want to say something about the way the Inquisitors perceived women, and I found this particular picture here, which here we have a kind of a helmet, and He's afraid of those fine dining and women. It's short. I mean, good food. Good food, get you to sin, and women need you to sin too. I mean, both of them. This is the idea. It's not what I think. It's not my idea. It's the concept here, okay? So, therefore, the Inquisition, believing by belief in the reality of witchcraft as both heretic and diabolical, targeted women who defied conventional roles of care and submission, because obviously if you are free, you don't really have to follow conventional rules. You are free. If a woman doesn't have a man to take care of, so she may feel like cooking, she may not feel like cooking. She may feel like helping others, she may not feel like helping others. So Elisabetha's independent lifestyle made her a priority, definitely, with much of the hostility, as we said, directed at her from other women. Now this trial highlights the social tensions and fears of the time, showing how accusations of witchcraft were often rooted in envy and competition among women, which reflected other anxieties about women's autonomy as well as the supernatural. Now, I'd like to say a few things about historians who wrote about witchcraft and women. One of the more interesting ones is a French historian by the name of, I don't know how to pronounce it in French, the name it doesn't sound French. He's Robert Mouchembal. He's a cultural historian, he's important, who wrote a lot about witches. And I think the French are excellent on the subject. Have done some fantastic work. I was actually exposed to them by the person who guided me when I did my MPhil thesis many years ago. Was Andrew McFarlane, who wrote about witchcraft in Tudor and Stuart England. So he guided me a lot about this. It's very interesting because I obviously he exposed me to a lot of these theories as well, and I think it's very important. Now, Mouchembal actually viewed the campaign against witches part of a larger strategy by elite groups to suppress popular culture, as to force erstwhile rural inhabitants to acculturate themselves urban and thus progressive values. In other words, what Mouchembal is saying is that this is something which was very common in the countryside, the practice of witchcraft, and it was usually the peasants who were being targeted. We find this, in fact, this kind of argument not only in France, but we find it, for example, in southwest Germany. We find it even in Spain, especially in the Basque region, where there are a lot of mass trials against women. We also find it in the north of Italy, and even in Switzerland, and as well throughout the British Isles, places like Aberdeen, for example, in Scotland too. And eventually we also find it in Massachusetts, in the famous Salem witch trial. And they're always, it's the same kind of pattern. However, the way witches are treated, where there is the Inquisition, is a little bit different from the way witches are treated in the places where the state kind of runs the place, in the Protestant countries, in other words. There is a bit of a difference. For example, in Scotland, quite a few women lost their lives burnt at the stake. Even in Massachusetts, even in other places. Loudon, for example, the famous case of the nuns of Loudon. It's a whole nunnery convent, which is they think they are possessed. So everyone is accusing each other out of this way. So the problem all the time that emerges, however, in all these cases, is that women were preservers and transmitters of popular culture, which make them particularly suspect. And this is something which is also cropping up, always cropping up. Women tended, at least in the past, tended to be quite conservative. That is, they like to follow the rules. So, for example, the problem when, even for example, the Jews, as an example, the Jews in Spain, they were expected, those who converted to Christianity, to start having pork and suet and things like that. They would stick to the olive oil, for example. And not on fasting days only, but even on the other days when it is permissible to eat meat. And also, in other words, people, normal Christian people, were expected to eat pork and pork derivatives like soup, what do you call it now?
Sauce.
Lard, yeah. So they stuck to the old rules because they did not want to change. So essentially, we can argue that magic was essentially a feminine province and became more and more suspect to the man, obviously, in such circumstances. As a result, you find in these documents a lot of mistrust of women, which often turned into suspicion of witchcraft.